Spotlight on Marketing, brought to us by Armstrong Lloyd, headhunters in the B2B marketing space. I'm your host, Karen Lloyd, and today I am joined by Nick Mason, the co-founder of Turtl. It's the first revenue-generating content platform to help B2B marketers turn content into pipeline and improve its impact on revenue. Nick has a really fascinating journey. He started as a software engineer, and alongside his co-founder, he turned a few lines of code at Oxford University into a company now supporting brands, hundreds of brands, in fact, including Cisco and Informa. So today we're going to talk about what ABM teams need to do to demonstrate return on investment differently, but also how he's gone about growing an SME from bootstrapping to 1 million ARR. And learning what to do when you don't know what to do. So if you're struggling to improve content's impact on revenue, or you're wondering how you're going to scale your SME in a crowded MarTech space, or you're just facing a challenge of overcoming your own difficulties as a founder, this one is for you. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, Karen, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great stuff. So Turtl started as just a few lines of code at Oxford, applying then psychological principles to the content. Can you tell us about that aha moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to be really clear, I was never sort of a researcher or PhD at Oxford. I'm not that smart, unfortunately, but was working on a project, a product and software project with a number of departments at medical sciences. And a number of them were looking at how we engage with content, the written word, images, etc. And what it is about that content and the way it's displayed that triggers us to engage with it, remember it, be influenced by it. And so it seemed to us that there was an opportunity to take all of that knowledge and use it to increase the impact and the outcomes that marketers could generate from content. And really that thread has stuck with us through all the years that we've been in business. And so really, we started with that idea of encoding good psychology into content by default so that marketers would have a very easy way to be more influential with their content that they produce. And so that's really how we got started. Like a few lines of code, we showed it to a few people. People believed immediately in the ability for the improved presentation of content to improve their outcomes. And really, we just kind of went from there.
Brilliant. And then you bootstrapped it as well. You, from what I understand, you bootstrapped the business to start with and got going. So what was that sort of journey in the early days of getting the product, the funding and everything else together?
Yeah, really interesting. So I guess, it started out really as just, luckily my background, as you said, as a software engineer and product person, so that kind of helps. So able to build to like a decent level. But the really exciting bit is really showing what you've got to customers or prospective customers at that stage, taking on board their feedback, refining, and just really working to make sure that what you've got is going to solve sort of genuine market problems. And so that was a really exciting phase, like a lot of meetings with customers. And, what's great is that you get the first few prepared to pay, and then you have to sort of look professional. You have to get the company set up. So it's quite an interesting stage. And as you mentioned before, getting to 1 million ARR, and obviously we're way past that now, but getting to 1 million ARR bootstrapped is kind of quite an achievement. It felt like at the time you're just sort of putting in hard yards. But as I look back, it was a really exciting time, but also quite an achievement, right? To get there with basically no funding and just an idea. So yeah, I'm quite proud of being able to deliver that.
And are you still bootstrapped now, or do you have funding?
No, so we took our first sort of institutional round sort of a good few years ago now from Octopus Series A. So yeah, they're on the board now.
Okay, fantastic. But as you say, those first few moments of writing code and going to customers and going, will someone buy this is quite frightening. As someone else, I've set my own business up as well. So it wasn't in software, but I understand that journey. Yeah. So fantastic. And you said before when we've spoken, you said that one of your biggest challenges is learning things you didn't know. And there's no manual, is there? I'm in the same boat as you as running a business, and sometimes you're just stuck. So what did you do in that situation?
Yeah, well, I have a phrase that I use every week with one of my mentors, which is every day is a school day. And like, it really is. And the thing is with starting a business is that there's no manual, there's no book you can read. There are books you can read, but every day is different. Every day brings new challenges, and every stage of growth brings new things that you need to think about. And so one of the hardest things is working out what you don't know, which is holding you back. So is it that I don't know what a good person in this role looks like? Is that the thing that's holding me back? Or is it that our strategy isn't properly aligned and I don't know something about strategy? Or is it, some condition in the market that I need to work out how to circumvent? So you've always got these challenges and headwinds, and really your job as a founder, as a CEO, I think, is to understand those, work out which ones you don't know about, and either understand how you can upgrade your skill set, or how you can go and find the person who can help you go and overcome that particular challenge. And so really you're constantly going through this. And whether you're growing, 100%, and, you need to work out how to scale a particular function, or you're tackling a particular strategic challenge, you always have that bit where you just don't know everything. And between books and mentors and advisors and people and self-education, you have to work out how to overcome that next hurdle. And that's what makes it really challenging, but also what makes it exciting.
And obviously you're a CEO and your background wasn't marketing first, but yet you're selling a MarTech product. What's your belief in marketing and having a marketing team and growing a marketing team?
I think marketing is really interesting, and I think that every business looks at it differently. And I think for me, marketing and the business are sort of intrinsically linked. Because if we think about the 4 Ps of marketing, that kind of is the business in many ways. And so I think like the connection through to product, how we show up, the types of things that we offer, like all of this is really sort of central. And I think that, obviously we help marketers with particular programs. So be that ABM, lead gen, demand gen, all of those sorts of things that we support. And we really help them drive better commercial outcomes. So pipeline and revenue, tying all those content investments through to pipeline and revenue. So while we support in that area with those types of programs, marketing is obviously a far wider subject. And for me is like intrinsically linked to the strategy of the business, necessarily so. And it is fundamentally one of the key determinants, how we strategize and execute there as to overall business success.
You use your own product in your own marketing?
Absolutely. Of course we do. So we use it for thought leadership, lead gen, demand gen, all of the use cases that we support. And the thing that we find it really valuable for is being able to provide a more engaging and immersive experience, but also crucially get the signals back about which companies, which contacts are reading what types of topics, pass that over to sales, and suddenly they know who they need to go and reach out to and speak to. So we found it really useful for that because, knowledge is power. And fundamentally, your content, we believe, should be always out there in the market, providing those commercial indicators and signals so that you can tie it back into your overall go-to-market. And, I think that too often content is sort of an island. So you'll produce a PDF or you'll run a report. Perhaps you capture the people who download it, but that's not really a signal. That's just showing that someone downloaded it. You don't know if they've read it. So actually being there with them as they read it, being able to then follow up on that engagement and intent, tremendously powerful.
No, exactly. Because I think you mentioned to me before that you helped one sales team beat their entire annual target with a single deal by using your platform, obviously without naming names. I wondered if you could walk us through how that was possible.
Yeah, that was super exciting, right? So this is when we really started to work on commercial outcomes. So we had the idea that if you take the signals that are created and we process them in various clever ways, and then sort of surface them to the customer in the right way, it can act as like a honing device. And so we tried this with one particular customer, and they sell into large sort of financial institutions. And we were able to show them that they hadn't realized, but there was a very large financial institution who, again, I can't name, who were reading a lot of their content in a very particular way. And they were able to basically work out from the engagement patterns roughly which departments it must have been. And they were able to initiate a conversation on the back of that intelligence, but not just initiate the conversation, but then keep talking to the right people about the right topics, because they could see what these people continued to read as the sales cycle went on. I'm not for 1 minute going to sit here and claim that we closed that deal for them, but I think we played a very important role in helping them understand what messages to use with which people at what time to keep the deal moving. And as it turned out, the deal was so big that for this particular sales team, it covered the whole sales target for the whole team for the year. So that was a really exciting thing to be involved with. And that really proved to me and to us, the power of this intelligence around just understanding, who's engaging, what do they care about in terms of moving deals forward and achieving commercial outcomes. Yeah, that was a really exciting one.
Yeah, no, that sounds it. And just in terms of like putting it into sort of more simplified terms then, so what sort of things would you be looking at different times in the funnel that you'd be like triggering the sales? What sort of, I don't know, what sort of content would you think there would be, literally?
So imagine you're running an ABM campaign and you've defined a group that you're going to go out to, a segment that you're going to go out to. What we help people do is to personalize, first of all, at pretty much any scale. So rather than everyone getting a generic PDF about, say, a particular market trend or whatever, you can go and scope that down and personalize it just for that individual. So job role, industry, interest areas, channel that they prefer to receive information over. We can go and actually tailor that communication at scale whether it's like for 10 people or 10,000 people, everyone gets an individual piece of content. And those can be sort of white papers, thought leadership, ebooks, landing pages, all of that sort of collateral that you might typically want someone to engage with. And then as they go and engage, we're monitoring all of that engagement, and we're pulling out, using AI and various other things, which topics are they interested in? Which channels do they engage in? What signals are they generating in terms of where they're choosing to spend time? So you can almost build up like a hit list of accounts to go after. And actually, that's what a lot of customers do, is they'll grade all of their accounts according to engagement. And then what they'll do is they'll say to the sales team, go and work from the top of this and work all the way down. Most engaged people at the top, but not just engagement, like what sectors and all the rest of it, and what topics have those businesses engaged with. So that rather than sales or marketing going and trying to follow up with a list of hundreds or thousands, start with the 10 most engaged, then the next 10 most engaged. And lo and behold, you get incredible results. And so one such example of people following through that is they actually were able to double their win rate. This is 8x8 in the telecom space that we work with. They were able to, in a sort of, I think, 9-12 month period, double their win rate from 13 to 26%, because they were able to put their salespeople on the right opportunities at the right times. And what's great about that is that it creates a cycle, because then you go and you take all of that intelligence and you go and use that to inform your content strategy going forwards. Because, okay, so we wrote about 5 or 6 different things, but these 3 really resonated with these groups, these 2 with these groups. And we've got signals that also these new topics should be worked into our content strategy. And so you set up a cycle or a flywheel of success where you're learning and improving. And for me, so often that's what's missing from content programs, is that ability to really learn and improve over time, not just in terms of clicks and downloads, but also in terms of the commercial outcomes that we as marketers are now tasked with driving.
In some ways, what you said, and this might be being slightly naive, but I would have thought everyone was doing what you're suggesting with ABM. You know, like I would imagine that's what they were doing. So are you finding from your research that other ABM teams are doing something different? Is there been a different approach in other companies?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, the big challenge that we see is setting up those feedback loops. I think, there's many challenges in ABM, but I think that one of them is often scale. And what tends to happen is that we can prove ABM at a low scale, but then in order to really double, triple, 10x the surface area of that ABM program, you need to add a lot more resource, because there's an awful lot of manual processes and things going on. And obviously that doesn't work, because the business isn't just going to scale up the number of people in the ABM team. We need to be doing more with less, remember. And so that's obviously a common pain point that we help to solve. But it's really the quality and the depth of the signals that come back that is so often lacking. And if you don't have the quality and depth of signals, your follow-up, be that through marketing or through sales, is going to be scattergun, poorly targeted, and poorly focused. And so really connecting those dots, between engagement and therefore what you should do next, is the other part of the feedback loop that is so often missing. So I agree, in 2025, you'd expect that every team was doing this, but more often than not, they aren't.
No, exactly. So from your research, what would you say is additional metrics that ABM teams rely on?
So we see a range of different things. The MQL is, I wouldn't say it's alive and well. I think it's trying to be phased out, but there are various different challenges with that. Sort of higher level engagement metrics like clicks or impressions are also measured. And some businesses do a great job, don't get me wrong, looking at things like cumulative reach within a particular account or cumulative engagement. But there always tends to be areas where we can improve, add an extra layer of understanding and insight into the prospect or customer, so that we can really support ABMers and sales teams of going out with the right message at the right time for the right person. So there's a range of different metrics, but really the key, I suppose, is being able to tie those through to the commercial outcomes. And that is where there is always a lack where we work. So being able to tie that engagement ultimately through to, okay, but what pipeline did that generate? What revenue did that close? Did we shorten sales cycles? Did we increase win rates? And that really is an area where we specialize.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I know in about 2023, a lot of companies we worked with really ramped up their ABM teams. And then in 2024 and 25, they closed them down again. Yeah. And some of them were on one-to-one or one-to-few. Do you think the one-to-one is the only thing to focus on here, or the one-to-few? What sort of format do you think people should work on with this approach?
I think there's a place for everything. I think it really depends on your strategy and your ambitions and what you're trying to do. Like we've seen people have great success with one-to-many, one-to-few, and one-to-one. It really just depends, like, what the best fit is for your go-to-market and for your ICP and how you think you're going to be most successful. It depends on sort of so many different factors with your ASP, your cycle length, like all of these things factor into that decision. So I don't think there's sort of a one-size-fits-all answer to it. I think you just need to look at what you're trying to achieve, what your market is like, what your resources are like, and then pick the best program, the best strategy for your context.
So just recapping then, so if you're running an ABM team right now, what metrics should you be using on a day-to-day basis? What would you say the absolute standard they should just be looking at for a one-to-few, one-to-many, or any ABM campaign, basically?
Well, the ultimate lagging indicator that we always encourage to get in place really early is ultimately pipeline and revenue and all of the associated metrics. Like you need to have the ability to track through to that. From our own research and our own surveys that we've done, there is just this ever-growing pressure on marketers to be able to justify that to the CFO and to the business more broadly. And the reason why we focus on that so much is that if you run a great ABM campaign program and everyone agrees that it was really successful, you need that as the receipts at the end of the day to justify what you spent and what you did and to make the case for continued and ultimately expanded budget. And so we always recommend get that in place really, really early. Work out how you're going to track through from activity to engagement, and then ultimately through to that pipeline and revenue metric. Because if you don't get that in place sort of day one, it's very, very difficult to go and construct that later. So with that in place, it then comes down to working out backwards from there. So, what kind of levels of engagement do we need to be seeing across what breadth of accounts and what types of personas in order for us to achieve those pipeline and revenue metrics? And so working back there, we like to look at things like, engagement per account, engagement per contact, number of topics that you've engaged them on, frequency of visit, depth of visit, all of these kinds of things that really build up a picture of, how are people engaging, and therefore what does that tell us about what we need to do next? So that's sort of like a leading metric, if you like. But then going even earlier, you can start to look at activities that you're doing. So, how much of our TAM are we going to go after? What's our capacity and what's our sort of bandwidth for going after it? And then, how many touch points? Are they the right touch points? Are we talking about the right things? So really thinking about activity, what's the activity that's going to be required? What are the leading indicators that we're going to have as a result of that activity? And therefore, how are we going to drive the ultimate lagging indicators of pipeline and revenue for the business? And I think getting those dots in place really early, and they're going to be slightly different for every business, exactly what you want to measure. But those are the things that we really recommend. That's kind of the model that we look through.
Yeah, great. And at what point do you think somebody should give up on an ABM account? So they're saying, like, literally, we haven't got any pipeline. We're not connecting the dots. We're not seeing it. ABM isn't working for us. Maybe it's the market. Maybe it's the other. It's impossible. I think we should walk away from our ABM approach and do something else.
I'm not sure that would ever be the right thing. I think that if you're in that position, the question is why? Because, the point of it, okay, so there are some cases where ABM is just not probably going to be appropriate, right? So if you're selling like high velocity transactional stuff, it probably doesn't make sense to do ABM, but then you probably wouldn't have started in the first place. But if you've got a reasonably sort of considered purchase where you need to influence a buying group and, you need to do that progressively over time, so you've picked ABM, you should always be able to understand if it hasn't worked, why it hasn't worked, and then go and unpick that and make it work. And the biggest mistake I think that we see with people doing that is the idea that you just create some content, you personalize it, you blast it out, and you wait for the pipeline to roll in. Like, it doesn't work like that. It has to be part of a sort of joined up strategic revenue effort across the business involving sales and marketing and hopefully the wider business as well, so that we can really sort of get behind and have that cumulative effect that we're trying to have on these key accounts. And if you've got the right measurement in place, you should be able to track back. If it isn't working, then did we just not do the inputs? So kind of start there. Did we actually try and engage these accounts? Did we do the right level of, whatever it is, marketing outreach, sales outreach? If we did do that, did people not engage? And then why didn't they engage? Was it on the wrong channels? Was it the wrong type of content? Did we talk about the wrong things? Have we misunderstood what our buyers are interested in? What do the engagement signals tell us about, how that went? And if that doesn't track through to pipeline and revenue ultimately, then well, why is that? Did we not follow up properly? Did we go and find a bunch of people who perhaps are interested in our content but have no ability to buy? Therefore, is our targeting wrong? So the point is, like, if you've got the right data, you should never be in the place where ABM is a theoretically good fit. It hasn't worked and you don't know why. You should always be able to use the data to go and refine. And that's the beauty of that feedback loop, which is that you don't have to get it right first time. You just have to make a start, collect the right data, and then refine and iterate really, really quickly. The speed of that feedback loop is vital, and also the quality of the signals running around that feedback loop. And you should over time navigate towards a place where you're really delivering the results that you want.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really good point. And I think also something you mentioned earlier where you said it isn't just about the persona or the buying group, it's also about the people. So how would you sort of use AI to make ABM sort of more targeted, not just to the CFO, but the CFO of that company, that human being?
Yeah,
is that something you can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that we're looking at the moment, which is quite exciting, which is the ability for AI to take a message and sort of personalize it really deeply. So based on everything that's known about the account, sort of firmographically, technographically, but also sort of the psychographics about the person that you're trying to get through, like what do they care about? What are they interested in? What are their pain points? And tailor the message around that. And, we're seeing a lot of this, I think, with email. So I don't know if you're the same as me, but I get so many emails now that, clearly an AI has scraped my LinkedIn page, and I just like, they go straight in the bin and it's a weird thing because, 5 years ago, let's say, or even less, that would have been done by a human being and I would have slowed down and read it. But because it's not done by a human being, I don't slow down and read it because I know it's just AI kind of junk. And so there's a really fine line to tread here between making it kind of credible and authentic and real and have that real sort of authenticity and trust, but also finding a way to scale it. And I think that what that probably comes down to is finding a way to leverage, what a company uniquely knows about a business or an individual in a way that another business can't, and sort of find a way to use AI to put that front and center in a credible, authentic way. What I don't think we can do is just sort of mass personalized content in the same way that we're mass personalizing emails, in the way that I said before, because we can kind of sniff it out now. We need to be a little bit clever and a little bit more authentic in order for that to really work. But it's definitely an area that we are heavily researching and looking at, and I think it's quite exciting.
Yes, it's because it's tricky. I mean, I about 2 years ago, I got an email from somebody saying, I know what university I went to and that they used to have great summer balls there. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's fantastic that this person knew this, because the first time I'd had something like that. And I was like, okay, I'll book the call. Whereas now I regularly get kind of benign things where someone's clearly scraped something from my LinkedIn. I saw someone else complaining about it. You don't need to tell me that I'm this, that and the other, because it's on my LinkedIn profile. So do you think, and that's where the frustration, so that's where the difficulty is, isn't it, from it now, our expectation. So what would you suggest? I mean, I'm excited to hear how it's going to work, if you can tell us. But
yeah, I don't have a silver bullet, and as I say, we're still working on it, but really it comes down to how you can credibly leverage everything that you know about an account and an individual to kind of make that impact. And the difficulty that we have, and this is always the challenge I think with marketing, where in many cases what you're trying to do is break the pattern. And so there's so much information that we receive all the time. Like if you think about all the channels that we've got, all the apps on our phone, constant notifications, how can you stand out against all of that noise? And you're quite right. A couple of years ago, someone working out what university you went to, that breaks that pattern. But that now is the pattern, because AI is doing that en masse for everyone. So we have to find out, what is the next thing that we can do in order to stand out and be noteworthy. And, these things always shift and change over time. So, the example I'm thinking of is at a breakfast event recently with Demandbase and Market Bridge. There was a really interesting conversation about long form versus short form content. For the last few years, we've heard how, short form is going to be everything. And like, if it's not a 30-second TikTok video, then it doesn't matter. I'm exaggerating. But there was a real sense in the room that actually, short form is we're more interested in moving up market again now and trying to do something a bit more valuable. So the challenge is everything is always a reaction to something. And I think our job as marketers is to kind of stay ahead of that curve and try and make sure that what we're doing is genuinely interesting and novel and worthy of someone's time, and not just a copycat of everything else that's being received and sent.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, to be disrupting, because also there are different ways. I mean, my 20-year-old, Mike, have children in their 20s. They know everything from TikTok, and they are always stunned that we don't know something because I'm not onto TikTok. Whereas, people that are my generation, we tend to we prefer the longer form stuff. So I think it's a generational thing. I don't know if you'd agree with that as well.
Yeah, I politely disagree with that. I think that because I was chatting about this with someone the other day, I think that my view is that if something is good, people will engage. So, which example to pick? My boys, well, one of my boys is 7. I sat down and watched a 2-hour movie with him a couple of weeks ago, and he was transfixed the whole time. It was great. He absolutely loved it. And it's about the quality of the thing, right? He'll also sit and read books about football for hours on end. He'll also sit and play chess, and he'll do these things. But he'll also go and do short form stuff. And I think that, there's a job there, which is, to be genuinely engaging and interesting. And I think that people will stick with it, even like the younger generation, even sort of 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds. And I've got a 5-year-old as well, maybe too early to tell with him. But they will sit and they will read and they will do things in sort of an intensive way for a long period of time if it's good and if it's valuable and if they're enjoying it. So I think that's our job as marketers, to sort of command that attention and to be worthy of it.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. So, yeah, thank you for making that. I take your challenge. But I'd love to talk finally, unless there's anything else on the ABM side. I think we've really covered a lot there. I'd love to talk more about how you, as a business, manage your own marketing and how you stand out in a busy MarTech market, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a real sort of David and Goliath type situation in many cases, where there's so many big players. Like you think about, the likes of Adobe and people like this in the space. And really what you've got to do is, again, it comes back to commanding attention. And the way that we do that fundamentally at our core is by being, as you mentioned earlier, the only content platform that helps marketers connect the dots between their content and pipeline of revenue. So close that revenue gap, because B2Bs continue to spend sort of 40% of their total marketing budget on content, but precious little to show often in terms of pipeline and revenue, creates this revenue gap that we exist to solve. And so that's our kind of wedge. That's our point of uniqueness. That's the thing that we really use to stand out from the market, because, many other MarTech tools obviously exist. They all promise sort of different benefits and different value propositions. And so really, for us, that point of difference and noteworthiness comes from that ability to connect those dots. And then obviously on top of that, we follow through and, we've got a product which is geared to deliver those benefits. All of our marketing talks about that. And we do sort of stand out things as well to be different. So there's not many brands that can turn up to a big marketing event dressed up in a turtle costume, for example. And so we create these opportunities to stand out and be different and earn people's attention. But for me, as always, as hopefully has come across, it's really important that there's substance beneath that. And so, when you're talking to the guy in the turtle outfit and think, that was a lot of fun, you actually realize there's a very serious message underneath there, which is that actually, your content can, should, and must in 2025 and 6 connect all the way through to driving commercial outcomes for the business, because that's what we're on the hook for now as marketers. So it really goes all the way from sort of what we do at the surface level, kind of how we show up and how we appear, both online and offline, and all the way back down to that very core of what we do, which is we really care and believe in the ability for marketers to drive better outcomes, not just outputs, but better outcomes, commercial outcomes from all of that content spent. So, and for me, it's really important that all that stuff lines up and it's credible at every link in the chain. So that's how we kind of approach the challenge.
Great. And in terms of your marketing team, do you have someone focused on product or demand or ABM yourself, or is it more of a generalist team?
Yeah, so we have a wonderful marketing leader who's really instrumental in defining not just what we do in marketing, but also the direction that we take other parts of the business as well. And that's really great, because I don't think that you can have a marketing function where you just kind of lob a product and lob a value proposition over the fence and say, go and market that. Marketing's job also is to understand the market and therefore to feed back on, well, what do we need to build and how do we need to position it and how do we need to think about other players in the space? And so, we're really lucky to have a wonderful marketing leader who does all of that and more. And beneath him, then he's got a brilliant team around him of sort of creatives who help to sort of make the brand come to life and make sure that we are noteworthy and differentiated visually, tonally, and that we show up in the right ways, but also some really skilled people, like some of the best in the world, around sort of product marketing, around demand gen and lead gen and all these different disciplines. And that all feeds up into that overall marketing strategy and, how we go to market. So yeah, we're really lucky to have a really strong team with very strong players in all of the core disciplines, I would say.
Great. It's such a pleasure to hear a CEO talk so passionately about their marketing team as well, because lots of people in this current climate come to me and say the founder doesn't really believe in marketing, and there's some negativity. People will be hopeful at listening to this and hearing that, there are companies that still believe and invest in marketing, and it's a worthy thing.
Yeah, it makes me really sad when I hear that, the fact that there's not, I can't imagine a world in which I didn't view marketing as probably one of the most important things that we do. It is, after all, sort of how we relate to the market, and the market is the thing that will determine our success. And if we don't align our products, services, messages properly with the market, like, you can't get anywhere. So, I always, I know what you just expressed is not uncommon. But for me, I just can't imagine it, because, it is so central to everything. And for the reasons that I've said, it must be. Otherwise, you're going to struggle.
And it's the inspiration for doing this podcast. So I can educate founders and CEOs, as well as, know marketing people are feeling heard in it. So it's great. We will be sending this out to CEOs so they can hear this and be inspired by you. Is there anything else I haven't asked you today that you'd like to cover in this?
I guess the only other piece that might be interesting to cover is just some of the ecosystem stuff. So many different sort of categories and types of technology are available to marketers nowadays. And I think one of the things that has come through loud and clear, certainly from the businesses that we work with, is the need to connect them all to tell a coherent story and to power the go-to-market, not as individual point solutions, but as joined up systems for delivering revenue. And so, if we think about, for example, intent data providers, 6 Sense, Demand-Based, Target, those sorts of players, CRMs and marketing automation platforms, the Marketos, the Paradox, the HubSpots, and then obviously revenue content platforms such as ourselves. How do those things all join up to drive the revenue flywheel? And so, what we focus a lot on is making sure that those technologies all speak to each other, so that, for example, you can take, what 6 Sense, Demand-Based perhaps are telling you about your target audiences, where they're engaging, where they're researching, funnel that through into sort of personalized content journeys for those people, get the signals back to go and increase the quality of the targeting, as I said before, and obviously to have all of that orchestrated in the background by the marketing automation platform, be that Marketo, Eloquent, whatever you may be using, so that cycle turns. And then fundamentally and critically for us, tying through then to your CRM or whatever your sort of system of record is for revenue, so that you can actually understand how those cycles and how those signals are driving those commercial outcomes. And we believe that when you've got all of that set up and you've got your sort of ecosystem of marketing technologies all joined up, singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were, turning the same cycle, you can make some really rapid and great progress in quite a short space of time, purely because you've got those flywheels set up with a properly integrated sort of ecosystem of technologies. So that's something that we always kind of strive to get right for the businesses that we work with.
And if somebody wants more information about that, what's the best thing for them to reach out to you, or should we put some details in the show notes?
Yeah, absolutely. So best place is to go to turtl.co, so turtl.co, and get in touch with us there. Or you can drop me a note on LinkedIn. I always love connecting with people and chatting to people, understanding their challenges. So yeah, probably those 2 channels are the best ones to go.
Brilliant stuff. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Nick. Thank you so much. I am also coming to an event where you're speaking, but this podcast probably will be published just shortly after that. I know you're going to be publishing some research, aren't you, at the event?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have our ABM 2030 report, which I think is potentially already gone out, but we're going to be making some noise about that at the event. I think you're referring to the Global ABM conference, right?
Yes, I am. That's right, yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, look forward to seeing you there.
It's been such a pleasure to speak to Nick today. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm really lucky to be a podcast host and speak to such inspiring business leaders like Nick. As a passionate business owner myself, I'm also a headhunter and managing director of Armstrong Lloyd sales and marketing recruitment firm. So if you're looking to grow your team and you'd like a conversation about what the current market looks like, please do drop me an email at karen@armstronglloyd.co.uk. I would love to hear from you. All the best now, and thank you for listening.